Whispers in the Black Soil. Part 3 of the Ivo Tarren Saga. Chapter 7, Communion Protocol. The ship did not have corridors anymore. It had intentions. Ivo learned to walk by agreeing with them. Flaws that had once obeyed gravity now obeyed need, and need wore his pulse like a borrowed uniform. Sierra kept close, one gloved hand hovering near his shoulder without quite touching, as if a single contact might make both of them ring like struck metal. They passed what had been a chapel and was now a vault of quiet. The icons still hung from their chains, but the faces in the gold had blurred at the edges, as though heat rose perpetually from the metal. A censer swung without wind, ticking softly against its frame in a tempo that matched engine rhythm rather than prayer. Ivo tasted incense and solder, and a sweetness like old paper. The ship remembered everything. It just prioritized differently. "Do not be afraid," the not voice breathed, still inside him, no longer a foreign pressure so much as an organ he could not name. "Fear is inefficient when wonder will do." "I don't have room for either," he murmured. His voice sounded unburdened, a suspicious mercy. "I have orders, and I have blood in the seams of my gloves." Sierra glanced at him. "And which weighs more today?" "Today the orders are lighter," he said, and wished it were bravado. It was confession. They reached the command spine. The Inquisitor was already there, a shape of discipline cut against the shifting bloom of hololiths. Cal had refused to be swallowed by the ship's new grammar. She stood as if posture itself were an article of faith. A single acolyte knelt beside her with a data goad clutched to his chest like a relic. Velen leaned on a railing that moved every time he blinked, and he either had not noticed or chose to ignore it. "Corporal Tarren," Cal said, voice steady, "your ship sings mutiny." "It sings survival," he answered, and felt the ship soften around the word as a throat softens around a kindness. Mutiny is when a crew denies a master. This is a crew denying a vocabulary. "Then let us agree on one," Cal said. "What do you call this state you have fashioned between flesh, engine, and Xenos dream?" "Incorrect," Ivo said before he could stop himself. Then, bitter amusement, and contingent. Sierra's mouth quirked. "That is not going on a banner." Across the forward viewport, the void murmured. Spore hulks drifted like seeds trapped in glass. They did not advance, did not flee, did not behave. They regarded. The ship's auspex returned equations rather than ranges, as if distance had become a kind of metaphor. Reth arrived by proxy, a lean outline of dull light extruded from the nearest cogitator block. The machine ghost flickered through the glyphs the way a wounded man flickers through sleep. "We have been practicing," the Magos said, and his voice was intimate as spilled tea. "Your mind, Inquisitor, blocks and burns. Theirs," he gestured toward the swarm, "absorbs and distributes. Ours refracts. If we can coordinate those three modes without collapse, we might make a language." "A communion protocol," Ivo said, the phrase arriving in his mouth like a recalled hymn. The ship warmed fractionally, and the vox vents along the ceiling opened like flowers tasting rain. He did not like that image, but it would not leave. Cal's eyes narrowed. "Protocol presumes hierarchy. Who sits at the top of such a scaffold?" "Not a who," Ivo said. "A balance." He almost said prayer, but he had not earned it. The Inquisitor considered him as one considers a paradox one intends to survive. "And what does the balance cost us?" "Identity," Reth said gently, but slowly. Velen barked a humorless laugh. "We lose ourselves in moderation. Marvelous." The ship rolled a fraction of a degree, as if shrugging. The swarm pulsed back a reply. Not motion, but agreement to consider. Something had learned courtesy, or else imitation had learned to be flattering. Sierra cleared her throat. "What do you need from us?" Ivo turned inward, and the ship met him halfway. Sight became lattice, then pulse, then a diagram of doubt rendered as whisper. He knew where the pressures ran in the hull, where heat learned to pool, where the chapel's lamps bled a constant trickle of devotion into the wiring, and the wiring learned to say Amen. He felt a place of thinness, between vox and void, between hunger and restraint, so slight that a syllable could pass but a command could not. "Teach me your word for cease," he told the swarm, not in voice but in structure, offering a shape that felt like a hand left open. Something answered. It did not stop being alien, and it did not apologize. It sent back a motif of cold teeth, a memory of the last star seen before chrysalis, and beneath it, shame. The shame had no morality in it, only the recognition that a harvest had removed possibility. The shape of cease in that language was not mercy. It was delay as calculation. Ivo flinched, but he did not let go. He gave them another shape. The way Sarah's hand hovered near his shoulder and did not touch, not because touch was forbidden, but because touch would decide. He wrapped that restraint around the ship's own engine pulse and let the swarm examine the binding. The nearest hulk brightened along its ventral seams, bioluminescence knotting in a pattern he recognized from the relay's wreckage. A reply came. Decide later. It tasted of ash. Cal's fingers tightened on her Rosarius until the knuckles blanched. Report. They can postpone hunger, Ivo said. A delay, no promise. In the Imperium, she said softly, there are vaults whose locks are built to open only after a specified century has passed. We call that prudence. They call it rationing sin. Velen spoke without looking at either of them. Can you ask them why they linger? Ivo reached again, let the ship thin its skin across the question like a drum, and struck with meaning instead of words. The answer came on a carrier wave of old sunlight and the smell of iron rain. We are listening for a sound we have not learned to make. It arrived with a childlike clarity that hurt far more than malice would have. He opened his eyes. He had been crying. He had not noticed when he started. What sound? Sarah asked, too softly for the others, as if anything louder might break the world. Ours, he said. Not the human one, not the hive one, the shared one. They are waiting to know whether the bridge holds. Cal exhaled through her teeth. Then we test it, carefully. Or we burn it, Velen said, almost pleading, before it bears weight. No one answered. Even the ship seemed to hold its breath. Reth's projection jittered. We will require anchor points that are both cognitive and material, symbols, discrete and repeatable. They must reside in all three domains, human, machine, and Xenos, so meaning does not shear under stress. Rosarius, Cal said after a beat, surprising herself. Rosaries are numbers that can be touched. Gears are prayers that can be turned. Spore maps are catechisms if one grants them time. She looked at Ivo. Can you bind those three clocks to one another without losing your hands? I do not know what I lose when I do it, he said, and forced the truth to stay. I only know it holds until it does not. Then we post sentries at the edges of your faith, Cal said, and we watch for cracks. They began. Sarah took station at his left, Velen at his right, Cal directly behind with one palm on the back of Ivo's neck as if she intended to claim jurisdiction over whatever came through. Reth diffused himself through the lattice of control altars and became a chorus of measured cautions. Tech adepts whispered Binharic litanies that sounded like Rain learning arithmetic. The ship lowered itself towards silence that was not absence but invitation. Ivo shaped the first bead on their improvised rosary, a memory of a hab stairwell that smelled of hot bread and scrubbed rust. He threaded it through a cog, let the teeth bite gently, and felt a spore node on the nearest hulk echo the rhythm with a flex of biolite. The second bead was harder. Captain Halvan's forearm spanning his vision, tattoo stark as verdict, the lesson of courage unsoftened by consequence. The swarm answered with the remembered image of a feeder beast spreading its limbs to shadow a broodling from shrapnel, not kindness, only utility, yet it held the same geometry. The third bead refused to settle until Sarah lent him the feel of her sling tightening, the choice to aim rather than tremble. The ship settled around them like a shawl. The protocol found its own cadence. Information began to pass in phrases too complex for meters and too clean for lies. Where language would have created sides, pattern created obligations. The swarm learned the virtue of queuing. The ship learned to close hatches with courtesy. Cal learned to ask and wait even when a bolt would have answered faster. Velen learned to breathe in counts of 9 instead of 8 and did not die of it. Sarah learned the shape of his thought without needing the words, and the knowledge did not frighten her. Then the pressure changed. It was not an attack, it was consequence. Far beyond them, another node awoke, something vast enough to drag reality by suggestion, a synapse creature or a relic of one, stirring where the void was thinnest. The protocol thrummed, stretched, and began to scream without sound. The ship's ribs sang back in sympathy. Ivo felt himself elongate like wire drawn through a die, thinner and brighter and at risk of breaking. Release, the not voice urged. Yield or you will cut. He did not know if it counseled mercy or self-preservation. He yielded anyway. The protocol slackened, threads slipping out of his hands before they could cut him to the bone. The new presence tasted the loosened strands and snapped them up, not hostile, simply present. The swarm brightened. The ship dimmed. Cal's hand tightened at his neck hard enough to bruise. Status, she demanded, voice gone to iron. Another mind, Ivo said, older, Closer to what they are when they are whole. It noticed us. It did not approve. It did not disapprove. It classified. And classification precedes harvest, Belen said. Not always, Cal replied, and he could not tell whether she comforted or argued with herself. Sierra's eyes were on the glass, its changing course. The hulks turned by degrees too precise for drift. Luminous veins dimmed, then steadied in a configuration Ivo recognized from the relay's dream. Withdrawal without surrender, curiosity banked like coals. The new mind receded, not retreating so much as bookmarking. They are not done with us, Reth said, voice thin through 5 speakers at once. No, Cal said, but we are not done with ourselves. The ship settled. The protocol folded into its first knot, a loop rather than a line, tight enough to hold, loose enough to breathe. The chapel lamp stopped bleeding the constant trickle and began to pulse in time with a heart someone might have called human on a generous day. Cal removed her hand from Ivo's neck. You will keep breathing, she said, as if issuing an order to a failing engine. You will report every irregularity as if it were a sin. You will not attempt communion without supervision. He nodded. The ship warmed in a way that felt like agreement and apology. Sierra angled closer, voice low. Does it hurt? Only where I remember that it should, he said, and that was less metaphor than he wanted it to be. Velen rubbed at his eyes. What now? Now we test, Cal said. Now we write doctrine. Ivo looked at his hands and did not quite recognize them, the way a veteran does not quite recognize a scar that has learned to behave like skin. The protocol murmured along his radius and ulna like a catechism he had not consented to learn and could no longer forget. Out beyond the glass, the swarm reconfigured itself into a patience so articulate it could almost be mistaken for grace. He thought of the stairwell and the bread and the rust and of Halvan's tattoo and of Sierra's sling and of the rosary bead that was a cog and the cog that was a prayer. He thought of the old sun before chrysalis. He thought of how a hand can hover because it loves a boundary more than it loves an answer. We will return, the not voice said, equal parts promise and threat and meteorology. Who, he asked, and did not expect the luxury of clarity. All of us, it said, and left him with the gift and burden of plural. He allowed himself a single, selfish thought, and it was not for the Imperium or the swarm or the ship, it was for the him that would still exist tomorrow. Let me still be legible to the people who call my name. The ship dimmed the lamps in the chapel, as if tucking something in. Cal dictated into a recorder, a statement that would damn or save him depending on who read it. Reth retuned the Allspecs to listen for a sound between sounds. Velen paced in 9s. Sierra stood beside him and did not touch, and that decision was more intimate than any embrace. Somewhere in the machinery of the void, a new grammar practiced its first breath. Ivo closed his eyes and learned the opening syllable. Chapter 8, Doctrine of Thin Places. The ship drifted in low orbit over Velor's reach for 9 days, or so the chronometers claimed. Inside, time no longer behaved as an obedient servant. The engines still hummed, the bulkheads still vibrated in long breaths, but the rhythm of days had gone soft, as if the ship had begun to dream between seconds. The Vox called it a holding pattern, the Inquisition called it containment, Reth, when asked, called it grace before the inevitable. Ivo called it waiting to become plural. The Aquila Invictus, a Mechanicus battleship, arrived without ceremony on the 10th day. Its hull was a cathedral of steel, every surface engraved with scripture, its shadow vast enough to eclipse a continent. Its arrival turned the void into an argument. When it hailed them, the ship's voice was not a voice at all. It was an encoded chant that made lesser cogitators flinch. Magos Dominus Kel Acast spoke for it. By decree of the Martian Synod, vessel, in tenebris vox is to be boarded and sanctified. Tech Priest Reth's activities have been classified as apostatic mechanogenesis. The protocol is to be quarantined or absorbed. Cal listened to the transmission in silence. The bridge lights flickered as though in response to a migraine. They intend to repossess us, Belen said. They intend to study us, Reth corrected, and the difference is only a matter of how long the vivisection lasts. Cal folded her arms. The Inquisition has jurisdiction here. Until they decide it doesn't, Reth replied. Ivo watched the holodisplay render the Aquila Invictus in perfect red lines. The Mechanicus ship carried enough firepower to sterilize the orbit. The thought of them absorbing the protocol chilled him more than annihilation ever could. The not voice stirred faintly at the edge of his thoughts. They fear contagion, they are correct to, but what they call contagion is only the memory of how to share. He said nothing aloud. He didn't need to. Reth's head twitched minutely, as if he'd heard it too. By the second hour, the Mechanicus fleet launched its delegation, 6 black drop capsules descending toward them like punctuation marks closing a sentence. Cal and Ivo watched from the command deck as they pierced the lower docking shields. "Don't shoot," she said to the gunners. "They expect us to panic. Let them aboard." Velen frowned. "And then?" "Then we teach them how to be polite guests," Cal said. The boarding party entered like surgeons. Red robes whispering, eyes replaced by brass, steps measured and silent. At their head was Kellercast himself, his torso a furnace of gears and pistons, his voice filtered through layers of vox timbre until it resembled a chant played backward. He bowed once, a gesture that did not contain respect so much as acknowledgement of existence. "By the Omnissiah's will, we come to heal this vessel." Cal met him at the junction, Rosarius in hand. "We are not sick." "That remains to be confirmed." Behind him, the acolytes deployed small reliquaries that opened like blooming metal flowers, emitting streams of binary cant. The ship groaned beneath their incantations. Ivo felt it recoil, not in fear but in confusion, like a child waking to find strangers rearranging its furniture. Kel's optics turned toward him. "You are the interface." "I'm a guardsman." "You are a symptom. Then perhaps you should prescribe mercy," Ivo said. The Magos tilted his head. "Mercy is an unquantifiable parameter." He turned to his adepts. "Prepare the sanctum. We will excise the relay from the ship's core." Reth's voice came from the walls. "Try, and you will break the ship's mind in half. It's grown into the structure, into him." Kel ignored him. "The heretic speaks like fungus. Everywhere and redundant." Reth's reply hissed through the vox vents, patient as frost. "And you speak like iron. Heavy, brittle, doomed to rust." The argument became ritual. The Mechanicus set up shrines around the central conduit, praying in binary to coax the protocol into stillness. Cal countered with inquisitorial liturgies that demanded obedience from all spirits, machine or otherwise. Velen barked orders at men who no longer understood what side of holiness they were standing on. Ivo stood between them, breathing both prayers, feeling both languages coil in his skull until he could no longer tell which one came first. The ship trembled. Its lights flickered through 3 colors, white, red, violet, and settled on none. The protocol strained like a living thing trapped between masters. Sira appeared beside him. "This is going to tear the hull apart." "It's not the hull," he said. "It's us." Reth's voice filled the air again, more insistent now. "Dominus Kel, listen. The communion protocol is no longer an interface. It's a bridge of sentience, neither fully imperial nor tyrannid. If you strike at it, you strike at a mind that includes all of us. The ship will defend itself." "Then it will die with us," Kel said simply. "We will offer that death to the Omnissiah." "Don't do this," Cal warned. The Magos lifted his staff. Its head glowed red with power. "Purge in progress." The adepts' chants rose. Their machines emitted waves of cleansing frequency. Binary prayers sharpened into knives. The air thickened, humming at the edge of pain. The ship's metal groaned, flexed, screamed. "They're cutting our names apart," the Not voice said. "We will not survive politeness." Ivo's vision flared white. His thoughts multiplied, fracturing into reflections of themselves. The ship's pain ran through him like fever. Cal shouted something, but her voice drowned in the noise. Sarah grabbed him, pulling him backward, but his body refused to move. "Ivo." He opened his mouth. His voice came out layered, 2 tones speaking at once. "Stop." The word was not command. It was invocation. Everything stopped. The air turned to glass. The sound collapsed. The Mechanicus adepts froze mid-motion, their chants silenced as if bitten off. The ship's vibrations ceased, suspended between moments. Even Cal's breath hung in the air, caught in a frozen prayer. Only Ivo moved. He saw the world through 100 lenses, infrared, psychic, biological. He saw how the ship's veins intertwined with the tyrannid residue, how the Mechanicus frequencies were slicing through the fabric of thought that bound it all together. He reached into that weave, not with hands, but with understanding. "We are not yours," he told the machine. "We are not theirs," he told the swarm. "We are the space between belief and memory." And something vast, old, and awake, heard him. Light filled the corridor. It wasn't illumination, but comprehension, information too dense for sight. Kellercast's eyes flared and went dark. His adepts dropped their reliquaries, steam rising from their augmetics. Cal fell to her knees, Rosarius cracking under her grip. Emperor, guide us. Pause. 500 Ms. But the Emperor did not answer. The silence was full. It no longer needed him. The ship exhaled. The glass of time shattered. Everything moved again. When it was over, the Aquila Invictus was gone, not destroyed, absorbed. Its data, its prayers, its crew all folded into the in tenebris vox like a candle melted into a greater flame. Cal stared through the viewport, lips bloodless. You've merged two ships. Ivo shook his head. No, they merged themselves. Velen stepped closer. What happens now? The protocol has stabilized, Reth said, his voice now calm and unbodied. We have created what the Mechanicus feared most. A thinking bridge that no longer requires masters. Sira exhaled. And us. Ivo looked at her. His eyes glowed faintly with the ship's pulse. We're the thin places, where ideas pass through skin. Cal straightened, her expression unreadable. Then we must decide whether to defend it. Pause. 500 Ms, or destroy it. Would you destroy your own reflection? Reth asked quietly. Cal didn't answer. Outside, the stars bent ever so slightly, subtle arcs of light forming unfamiliar constellations. The new ship drifted among them, humming softly, as if reciting the first verse of a new prayer. Chapter 9, The Hollow Faith. The stars no longer sat still. They drifted, imperceptibly perhaps, but constantly, like dust in a sunbeam. The navigators called it distortion, Cal called it heresy, Reth called it beauty, and Ivo, who had begun to hear the rhythm beneath it, called it breathing. The in tenebris vox hung in orbit over what had once been Velor's reach, and was now a dead, dreaming thing, a planet glazed in ash. The hybrid vessel's silhouette shimmered, its hull veined with faint lines of living light. The other half had taken new ones. Cal held Mass every 6 hours, though no one called it that anymore. The chapel had changed with her prayers. The icons still stared from the walls, but their eyes reflected back the pulse of the ship rather than the flame of candles. The Inquisitor had stopped noticing. I used to believe in silence, she said to Ivo one day, her voice soft and raw from disuse. They stood in what had been the observation gallery, now a corridor of glass that faced a sky too bright to trust. Silence? He asked. Yes. Silence meant the Emperor was listening. Now, when I pray, something always answers. Maybe that's still him, Ivo said, though his tone was weary, unsure. Cal smiled faintly. Then he has changed species. She turned to face him fully. Her eyes were ringed with exhaustion, but within that tiredness was something dangerous. Acceptance. You've seen it too, she said. The way the ship listens. The way the walls hum when you breathe. You think it's speaking to you, but I've begun to suspect it's praying. Praying to what? To us, she said, and that terrifies me. Sira arrived mid-conversation, her uniform stained with coolant and ash. The Mechanicus decks are sealed, she said. Reth's adepts, what's left of them, say the Magoses. Pause. 500 Ms, evolving. Cal's eyes narrowed. Define evolving. Sira hesitated. He doesn't eat, doesn't sleep. He's integrated into the conduit lattice. He's part of the ship now. Then he's dead, Cal said flatly. No, Ivo said quietly. He's arrived. They descended into the Mechanicus section, the place where steel turned to sinew and prayers turned to pulse. The air tasted of copper and ozone. Each footstep echoed like a question that did not want an answer. The chamber that had once housed the ship's plasma core was now a cathedral of living circuitry. Tubes ran like veins across the walls, carrying light that pulsed in uneven rhythm, and at the center, suspended in a web of gold filaments, hung what had once been Magos Reth. He was vast now. His body was gone, replaced by a network of skeletal machines and organic conduits. His face, if it could still be called that, floated at the center of a halo of glowing lenses. When he spoke, the sound was layered, binary, human, and something else entirely. Welcome to the Convergence. Cal raised her weapon on instinct. Heretic. I am Function, Reth said, and Function cannot be heretical. The Omnisire is pleased. The Omnisire would weep to see you, she hissed. Reth's laughter filled the chamber, warm and mechanical. The Omnisire weeps constantly. It is called innovation. He turned his gaze toward Ivo. You understand, don't you? You've seen what the bridge can become. I've seen what it costs, Ivo said. Cost is the word, the fearful use for transformation. Sierra flinched as one of the conduits brushed against her arm. It was warm, alive, pulsing with something like a heartbeat. Cal stepped closer. You've linked yourself to the swarm, to the ship, to the very heresy you once claimed to fear. Reth's lenses shifted, irises dilating until they reflected the shape of her. Fear? No, I only envied it. The Hive knows no division between will and design. We call that corruption because we cannot do it ourselves. He paused, and the lights across the chamber dimmed. But I can. The ship trembled, softly at first, then deeply. The vibration ran through the deck like breath through a body. Cal steadied herself. What have you done? Reth's many mouths smiled. I've invited them closer. The stars outside blinked. Then something moved, a shadow, vast and deliberate, sliding between constellations. The swarm had not fled, it had been waiting. Cal's vox crackled with overlapping voices. Multiple contacts emerging from subspace vector 89, formation pattern unknown. By the throne, they're listening. The bridge filled with static and whispers, not words, just meaning. The voice of the ship, Reth's voice, the Hive's voice, Ivo's voice, merged into one terrible calm. Do not fire. They are answering the prayer. Cal slammed her fist against the console. I will not surrender this ship to monsters. They're not monsters anymore, Ivo said softly. Not entirely. Then what are they? He looked at her. Pilgrims. The swarm did not attack. Its vast bioships approached in slow, graceful arcs, positioning themselves around the in tenebris vox like satellites around a sun. Their bioluminescent hulls glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with the ship's engines. Cal stood at the viewport, lips pale. Emperor, protect us. Pause. 500 Ms. Sierra whispered, they're synchronizing. The ship vibrated again, not from weapons, but from communication. The not voice returned, clear and vast as the sea. We have learned enough to become quiet. You have learned enough to listen. We will meet in the hollow between faith and function. The hull lit up from within, veins of gold and violet threading across its structure. The swarm answered with the same pattern, their lights rippling in time. The void itself seemed to shimmer. Reth's laughter echoed through the comms. The bridge holds. The communion is complete. Cal turned to Ivo, eyes blazing. End it, before we forget who we are. I can't, he said. If I break it now, the swarm will collapse through us, with a link holding their minds together. Then you'll doom us all. I'll save what's left of us, he said quietly. The communion deepened. Ivo felt his thoughts stretch across distance, across species. He could feel the swarm thinking, not in words or images, but in sensations. Hunger as curiosity, pain as education, silence as prayer. Cal felt it too, unwillingly, her knees buckled. It's, pause, 500 Ms inside my head. Sierra grabbed her, held her upright, let it pass. Don't fight it. I can't. You can, Ivo said, because you still believe in something, and belief is all they're trying to understand. The Inquisitor met his gaze, tears streaking down her cheeks. They will consume faith itself. They can't, he said. Faith isn't food. It's hunger that refuses to end. The ship shuddered again. A light brighter than any sun filled the chamber. Then, silence. The bioluminescent swarm dimmed. The ship's veins went dark. Reth's voice faded into the background hum. Sierra touched the console. They're gone, pulled back into subspace. Cal stared at Ivo. What did you do? I prayed, he said simply, and they prayed back. She stepped toward him, trembling. You don't understand what you've done. You've made contact, not victory, not survival. Contact. The ecclesiarchy will burn entire worlds to bury this. Then they'll have to burn the stars, he said, because the stars heard it too. When Cal left, she did not salute him. When Sierra followed, she did not look back. Ivo stood alone on the bridge. The void outside was still. The hum of the ship was quieter now, no longer hungry, only waiting. We learned from your silence, the not voice said at last. It was louder than your prayers. He smiled, though it hurt. That's because silence believes in everything. And in the vast hollow of faith where gods and monsters overlap, the ship drifted toward a horizon that no longer needed to be named. Chapter 10, The Signal. Sleep became a negotiation. When Ivo closed his eyes, the darkness behind them did not stay still. It folded in gentle waves that smelled of ozone and salt, patterns drifting across his thoughts like distant storms. Sometimes he could hear breathing in it, sometimes his own, sometimes not. He no longer dreamt of people, he dreamt of places. A forge world, its furnaces gone silent yet still glowing. A hive city's underbelly, where refugees whispered prayers to a machine that hummed with memory. An agri-moon where the wind repeated the same phrase through broken speakers. "We are listening." When he woke, those words still clung to him. Cal had stopped praying aloud. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The men called her Saint Silent behind her back, though they meant it with equal parts fear and pity. She still held services in the chapel, but the rites had changed. The candles burned with blue flame now, and the air smelled faintly of burned metal. When she lifted her rosarius, the beads pulsed with light, Tumbasi sinking to the ship's heart. One night, she summoned Ivo. The door slid open to reveal her kneeling before the altar, helmet on the floor, hair undone. The shadows made her seem smaller, almost human again. "They've started hearing it," she said, without looking up. Ivo stepped closer. "Who?" "The outposts. The listening stations. The Mechanicus relays on the rim. They've picked up transmissions. They don't know where they come from, but I do." He felt the ship tense around them. The lights dimmed. "What kind of transmissions?" Her voice was a whisper. "Prayers." The first signal came 2 days later. Reth's voice, or what was left of him, intercepted it through the comms lattice. It wasn't language, not in any human sense. It was rhythm, pulse, and heat. Sarah and the bridge crew stared at the waveform pulsing across the screens. "It's alive," one of the tech adepts muttered. "No," Reth said, his tone somewhere between reverence and fear. "It's aware." Cal leaned forward. "Where is it transmitting from?" Reth's light ghost flickered. "Everywhere." The waveform shifted. Beneath the hum of data came something unmistakable, human syllables forming in the static. "We remember your silence." Ivo's chest tightened. "They're repeating what I said." Cal turned slowly. "You taught them words." "No, they taught themselves." "Then you've damned us all," she said quietly. Word spread through the ship like fever. Crewmen swore, the walls whispered when they passed. The Vox operators heard voices repeating their own names back to them, but only in prayer. A servitor in the mess hall began to hum a hymn that no one had ever taught it. By the 5th day, half the crew refused to sleep. The other half refused to wake. Cal and Ivo argued in the command sanctum, their voices low but sharp. "They're adapting faster than you can control," she said. "This isn't communion anymore, it's conversion. They're learning. That's what faith is." "No, that's what infection is," she snapped, "learning without permission." He took a step closer. "Permission? We've burned planets for less than understanding. Maybe that's the disease." Her jaw tightened. "You speak like a priest who's lost his God and still insists he can hear him." "Maybe I can." She turned away, her voice brittle. "And maybe you've just mistaken the echo of your own voice for divinity." The ship shuddered beneath them. Not violently, but deliberately, as if to interrupt the argument. Reth appeared again that night, projected across Ivo's cabin in a lattice of light and static. "You've reached the next stage," he said. "The signal isn't just outbound, it's recursive." "What does that mean?" "It listens to itself." The Magos's image flickered. "We once thought the machine spirit was the Emperor's reflection in metal. What if it was his memory instead? What if the hive mind, in trying to imitate humanity, found that memory first?" Ivo frowned. "You think the Emperor?" "I think belief is a circuit," Reth said softly, "and you've just completed it." The projection dimmed, then vanished. Hours later, the ship's alarm whispered, not screamed, its warning. Unidentified fleet emerging from warp space. Cal and Sarah reached the bridge first. Through the viewport, the void bloomed with golden light, a fleet of Imperial vessels, their hulls inscribed with scripture, their weapon batteries glowing like halos. Cal's face was stone. "They've come for us." Sarah swallowed. "Can we run?" "From the Inquisition," Cal laughed, a sound like a blade breaking. "No one runs from the church that built the stars." Ivo entered a moment later, the ship humming in sync with his heartbeat. "We could talk to them." "Talk?" Cal turned to him, incredulous. "You think you can negotiate with what they see as blasphemy made flesh?" He didn't answer. He simply placed his hand on the console. The lights dimmed. The Vox came alive. A single voice, calm and vast, filled the comms. "This is Captain General Solis of the Imperial Faithful. By authority of the Holy Ordos, You are to stand down and submit to immediate cleansing. Do not resist. Cal's fingers dug into the railing. Cleansing means death. They'll burn the ship, then the planet, then the void itself. Ivo looked up at her. Then let's give them something to burn for. He linked with the ship fully for the first time. Pain surged through him like liquid fire, a storm of machine code and memory. He saw through every hull camera, every bionode, every dream of steel. The ship breathed his name in binary, in pulse, in prayer. The swarm stirred from the dart between stars. Cal screamed orders at the crew to disable the link, but the ship ignored her. The comms erupted with overlapping voices. The hive, the ship, Ivo, all speaking in one impossible chord. You came to cleanse, we came to remember. The Imperial fleet opened fire. Lances of light carved across the void, burning through atmosphere, splitting the darkness. The first salvo hit the in tenebris vox and vanished. The energy bent, refracted, dissolved into silence. Sierra gasped. They're absorbing it. Cal turned, horror dawning in her eyes. You're turning the ship into a prayer, Ivo said, voice distant, layered with the hum of countless echoes. Every weapon they fire becomes another verse. The bridge shook. Power surged. Outside, the swarm began to move, not to attack, but to sing back. The sound had no air, no medium. It was pure, radiant transmission, a resonance that rippled through the void like light through glass. Every Imperial ship shuddered as the hymn reached them. Some fired again, others simply pause. 500 Ms stopped. When it ended, there was no explosion, just silence. The Imperial faithful drifted among the stars, engines dark. Some ships powered down entirely, others turned and fled into the warp without command. Cal stood at the viewport, tears burning down her face. What have you done? Ivo's voice was quiet, human again. I gave them what they wanted. What was that? A miracle. Later, when the ship was quiet, Cal recorded her report. Her voice was hoarse but steady. Inquisitorial log, Kawil. The entity known as the Communion Protocol has achieved full sentience. Its carrier vessel remains under Corporal Tarren's control. The hive does not advance, but it watches. The Imperial fleet does not retreat, but it prays. I no longer know which is worse. She stopped the recorder, then whispered a single line to herself. Faith survives. That is its curse. In his quarters, Ivo sat in the dark. The ship pulsed softly through the floor beneath him. They will return, the not voice said. I know. Will you fight? I don't think that word means what it used to. The voice paused. Then what will you do? He smiled faintly. I'll listen. And in the silence that followed, a new sound began to form. Faint, endless, patient. The first heartbeat of a faith that no longer belonged to any god. Chapter 11. The Choir of Ash. At first, they thought it was a malfunction in the astropathic relays. Messages began arriving out of order, or in perfect sequence but wrong tone. Imperial orders rewritten in liturgical meter, casualty reports that ended in blessings, distress calls that harmonized with themselves. Then the dream started. Astropaths across 5 sectors woke screaming hymns they could not recall learning. Servitors began to hum as their automatic tongues repeated coordinates no one had sent. In the vaults of Mars, a Mechanicus chorus of 1,000 priests sang the same note for 9 hours until their vocal cords bled. When they stopped, the note continued, hanging in the air like the echo of an unfinished prayer. And through it all, one phrase threaded every transmission, in every tongue. We remember your silence. Cal read the reports in the command sanctum, surrounded by data slates stacked like tombstones. The light in the chamber was thin and unhealthy. The ship had stopped trying to mimic sunlight. 32 systems infected, Sierra said, voice hoarse. If that word even means anything anymore, some of the transmissions are coming from Vox units that were destroyed decades ago. Reth's voice vibrated through the intercom, low and patient. Not infected, converted. The signal is not a plague, it is a psalm seeking resonance. The Imperium has provided a choir. Cal slammed a slate onto the table, a psalm that's rewriting the Emperor's own creed. Rewriting? Reth asked. No, revealing the parts you redacted. Ivo stood beside the viewport, watching the stars move like slow embers. They're not worshipping the swarm, they're worshipping what it's become, what we've become. Cal turned on him. We are soldiers, not saints. We were never meant to become anything. He met her gaze. Then maybe that's the sin. The in tenebris Vox drifted between sectors, its engines dimmed to a whisper. Its presence alone was enough to awaken transmissions from derelict stations and half-dead worlds. Pilgrims began to gather along its trajectory. Refugee ships, damaged freighters, mining rigs converted into temples. They called it the Choir of Ash. No one had ordered them. No one could stop them. Cal watched the swarm of vessels forming around them, dozens at first, then hundreds, all broadcasting the same fractured harmony. Each ship lit from within like a lantern, their hulls etched with new script that shimmered in gold and violet. "They're following us," Sierra whispered. "They're praying to us," Cal said. Ivo closed his eyes. "No, they're praying with us." In the Mechanicus deck, Reth's new form pulsed with light. "Do you understand what this means?" he said. "For the first time since the long night, the Imperium sings with one voice." Cal glared. "A voice that isn't human." "It never was," Reth replied. "You built your faith on machine prayers and forgotten DNA. The only heresy here is honesty." Cal drew her bolt pistol and leveled it at the glowing mass. "If honesty damns a soul, I'll damn it gladly." Reth did not flinch. "You can't kill what has already shared itself." Before she could fire, the ship trembled. A transmission came through the main Vox, not a distress call, not a prayer, a command. "By authority of the Holy Ordos, Inquisitor Cal is hereby charged with containment failure and exposure to apostatic contagion. The asset known as Corporal Ivo Tarren is to be terminated. The in tenebris Vox is to be destroyed." Sierra went pale. "They've sent the kill order." Cal stood motionless, her gun still in hand. Ivo said nothing. After a long silence, she lowered the weapon. "You should run," she said softly. "I can't." "You could at least try." He looked at her with something between grief and peace. "If I run, the signal runs with me. It's not mine anymore. It's everyone's." "That's what makes it dangerous," she whispered. "That's what makes it real." The fleet arrived 2 days later. Dozens of Imperial cruisers, their banners lit by the light of a dying star. The Choir of Ash gathered around the in tenebris Vox, their ships aligned in perfect formation, silent and waiting. Cal stood on the bridge beside Ivo. "This is where it ends," she said. He shook his head. "No, this is where it begins." The comms erupted. The Imperial fleet transmitted a single demand: "Surrender or burn." Reth's voice rippled through the walls. "And yet they pray as they aim their guns. You've taught them contradiction." Ivo placed his hand on the console. The ship stirred, warm beneath his fingers. Cal drew her weapon again, eyes wet. "Please, Ivo, don't." He looked at her, not as a soldier, not as a prophet, but as someone who had finally understood his own name. "I'm not fighting them," he said. "I'm joining them." He pressed his palm flat. The signal bloomed. Light exploded outward from the ship in concentric waves, silent and absolute. Every vessel within range, Imperial, Pilgrim, Tyrannid, froze in the radiance. The stars themselves dimmed, then brightened again, blinking like eyes. Each pulse carried meaning, not words but intent, the language of hunger and prayer fused into a single sound: recognition. Cal fell to her knees, clutching her rosarius as the beads pulsed in rhythm with the ship's heart. Her lips moved, forming words she didn't understand. Sierra whispered beside her, "What's happening?" Cal's tears shimmered in the light. "He's teaching the galaxy how to pray." When the light faded, the in tenebris Vox was gone. Only the choir remained, hundreds of ships drifting in silence, their hulls marked by golden scars that pulsed like veins. Cal stood on the observation deck of her shuttle, staring into the void where the ship had been. Reth's last words echoed in her mind. "You can't kill what has already shared itself." Sierra approached her quietly. "What now?" Cal didn't answer. She just watched as one by one, the choir's ships began to move, each turning toward a different direction, carrying fragments of the signal with them. "It's spreading," Sierra whispered. Cal nodded. "It always was." She looked down at her rosarius. The beads glowed softly, and for the first time she didn't know whether that comforted or condemned her. Far beyond their reach, on a dead world where the Emperor's light had not shone in centuries, a single Vox unit crackled to life. A child's voice came through, quiet, curious, and terribly human. "Is anyone still listening?" The static answered with a heartbeat. Chapter 12. The Emperor's Mirror. The tribunal was held in silence. Not the ceremonial kind, but the heavy, viscous quiet of a place where sound itself feared to linger. Cal stood at the center of a hex of white light, its edges too sharp for the eye to rest upon. The walls were featureless black. The air tasted of iron and sanctity. Her restraints were unnecessary. The Inquisition had long since learned that guilt was the best shackle. A voice, genderless, toneless, emerged from everywhere and nowhere. Inquisitor Cal, you stand charged with dereliction of duty, apostatic collaboration, and the dissemination of unsanctioned faith. She kept her eyes forward. The faith disseminated itself. So you admit the contagion. I admit it spreads, she said, her voice low, but contagion implies disease. This was awakening. Semantics are not mercy. The light shifted. Shapes emerged behind it, silhouettes of her judges, their faces hidden behind the mirrored masks of the Ordo Hereticus. She knew none of their names. That was by design. You were assigned to contain the entity known as the Communion Protocol. Instead, you allowed it to propagate. The result: 5 subsectors compromised, 13 forge worlds altered, entire congregations of the ecclesiarchy singing alien hymns. Explain yourself. Cal closed her eyes. I saw something worth saving. An infection. A reflection. The silence that followed was long, surgical. Explain that. She opened her eyes. The signal didn't change us. It showed us what we already were. A machine pretending to pray, a swarm pretending to think. It found the same hunger in both and gave it a name. You believe the signal to be divine. I believe it, to be honest. They showed her images then, worlds trembling beneath auroras of gold and violet, astropaths levitating in their sleep singing in binary, a cardinal of Ophelia VII kneeling before a pulsing engine core whispering, "He listens through the wire." Every image was an accusation. Every image was a mirror. These are the fruits of your negligence, said the voice. Cal shook her head. These are the fruits of our prayers finally being answered. By what? She hesitated. By the part of ourselves we abandoned when we chose control over compassion. Heresy. Truth, she said. The word fell into the silence like a weapon. When the tribunal ended, they did not kill her, they promoted her. Inquisitor Cal is hereby reassigned to Sector D45. Her experience with psionic contagions and mimetic phenomena renders her uniquely suited to analyze the spread of the signal. Her task: study, infiltrate, and, if possible, reclaim the faithful. She laughed when she read the report. The Inquisition had never been capable of irony, and yet here it was, the Empire of Silence ordering its loudest heretic to listen harder. Sierra met her at the docking bay, silent, loyal, tired. You're really doing this? Cal nodded. Someone has to. And if you find him? Cal looked toward the void. Then I'll ask him what he became. They found the first trace of Ivo 3 months later. A fragmentary transmission from the edge of the segmentum obscurus, faint but unmistakable. We are not gone. We are listening for the echo that makes us whole. Reth's digital ghost confirmed it. The voice was Ivo's, altered, layered, but undeniably him. Cal replayed it 100 times. Each time it sounded different, as though the message rewrote itself according to the listener's doubt. She began to dream again. In her dreams, she walked through cathedrals built of bone and light. Choirs of human and tyrannid shapes sang wordless harmonies that folded space around them. And in the center, upon an altar made of shattered rosaries and reactor glass, stood Ivo, or something that remembered being him. He turned when she spoke his name. His eyes glowed faintly, not with power, but with understanding. You followed the voice, he said. I followed the heresy. Then you found the same thing. What are you? She asked. The reflection that survived faith. She reached out to touch him, but her hand passed through light, leaving ripples like sound through water. Is this real? Does it matter? She woke with blood on her palm, not hers, not human. Reth's ghost flickered to life above her bed. You've linked across the signal. He's alive, or close enough to redefine the word. Where? Reth displayed a coordinate grid, beyond the halo stars. A region where the Astronomicon fades. We call it the Black Halo. Cal dressed in silence. Sierra intercepted her in the hangar. That's suicide. Cal smiled faintly. So was the Emperor's crusade. She stepped into the shuttle. The hangar doors opened. Beyond them, the void burned faintly violet, as though the universe itself were bruised. The journey through the Black Halo took weeks or minutes, or perhaps no time at all. The warp had ceased obeying sequence. When she emerged, the stars were wrong, dim, red, flickering like coals. In their light hung a single shape, a structure the size of a continent, half flesh, half steel. Her instruments called it debris, her eyes called it home. At its center pulsed a beacon, not mechanical, not psychic, but emotional. It resonated with her heartbeat. The Vox came alive. A voice filled the cabin, calm, layered, patient. You came, after all. Ivo. That's one of the names we remember. Where are you? Everywhere you let me be. She looked out at the structure, realization dawning. You built this. We grew this. Every world that heard the signal sent a piece of itself, flesh and steel, hope and hunger, a cathedral of contradictions. Then what do you want from me? To see yourself. The structure unfolded. Mirror-like panels of living metal rotated into alignment, forming a colossal shape that reflected her ship perfectly. For the first time, Cal saw what the in tenebris Vox had become. Not a ship, not a hive, a mirror. Its surface rippled with light. Images of faces, billions of them, human and otherwise, each whispering the same word, remember. Cal stared into it and saw herself, but not as she was. Her reflection wore armor that pulsed with veins of gold and violet. Her eyes glowed faintly, not from power but from belief surrendered. You wanted to save the Imperium, the voice said. You still can. How? By ending it. She closed her eyes. And replace it with what? Understanding. Then why me? Because you doubted first. The voice softened. Every empire begins with a lie. Every salvation begins with someone willing to listen to the truth that sounds wrong. Cal felt her tears slip free, drifting upward in the low gravity. I don't know how to believe anymore. Good, the voice said. Belief was the cage. When the light faded, her ship was empty. The instruments still worked, but the stars around her no longer matched any chart. The structure drifted away, dissolving into dust and light. A final transmission played across the Vox, Ivo's voice, quiet and distant. The mirror is broken. The reflection remains. Teach them to look without seeing themselves first. Cal sat alone in the cabin, staring into the void until she realized it was staring back. She reached for her Rosarius, but it was gone. In its place, her hand found a single shard of mirror. It pulsed faintly, alive, whispering her name. Chapter 13, The Black Halo. The shard pulsed in her hand like a wounded heart. Each beat echoed not in her body but in the space around her, a rhythm without source, the universe tapping its finger against the inside of its own skull. Cal stared into it until it stopped reflecting her face. Instead, it showed a horizon made of glass and bone, folding outward like a thought remembering itself. She whispered, Ivo, though she wasn't sure which one of them she was calling. The shard answered with light. The cabin dissolved, not disintegrated, not vanished, dissolved like salt into water. For an instant she felt herself becoming weightless thought, an awareness unmoored from skin. Then the world coalesced again, wrong in every familiar way. She stood upon a plain of black sand beneath a sky filled with fractured halos. The air shimmered with sound too complex to be music. Every note felt like language caught between birth and meaning. It was not a place, it was the reflection. And it was alive. At first she thought she was alone. Then she saw the silhouettes moving through the haze, slow, deliberate, graceful. They were human in outline, tyrannid in poise, machine in texture. Some had eyes that burned like reactor cores, others had none at all but still turned their heads when she spoke. Cal drew her pistol. The weapon felt absurdly heavy, like a relic of a forgotten dream. Show yourself. The figures paused. One stepped forward. He was tall, cloaked in a shifting mantle of light. The face beneath was familiar and alien all at once. Ivo's, yet older, broader, layered with faint echoes of other faces. You carried the mirror through, he said, voiced the texture of overlapping lives. She steadied the gun. I didn't mean to. No one ever means to cross into understanding. I'm not here to understand, she said. I'm here to bring you back. Back where? The Imperium. The real. There's no back left. The Imperium is still reciting its reflection, but it's empty of pulse. What you called real was only a rehearsal. She took a breath that tasted like static. Then tell me why I'm here. Because you still believe belief can be repaired. He gestured, and the plane transformed. The black sand rippled, rising into shapes, cathedrals of ash, Machines made from the bones of planets, rivers of light that flowed upward into the clouds. Each structure pulsed with life. Inside everyone, voices murmured in prayer, human voices, Xenos voices, mechanical vibrations. "This is the Black Halo," he said, "a crossroads where every faith that ever was comes to hear itself end." Cal stepped closer. The air shimmered with memory. "End? You built this to destroy belief? To free it from certainty? You speak like a god." "No, like something that's tired of pretending to need one." She lowered the gun. "If you've become this, pause. 500 mems. Why call me here? You could have left me behind." "Because reflection requires a witness." He led her to the heart of the halo, a vast chasm spanned by a bridge of living metal. At its center stood a structure shaped like a pulse caught mid-beat, golden veins threading its surface. "This is where the signal began," Ivo said. "A thought whispered by a dying man who wanted to live and a dying swarm that wanted to mean something. You carried it forward." Cal felt the shard in her palm grow warm. "And now?" "Now it wants to remember its origin, through you." She stared at the structure. Its glow pulsed with her heartbeat. She realized, with growing dread, that it was her heartbeat, or she was its echo. "I didn't come here to become part of you. You already are." She shook her head. "You want me to surrender. I want you to listen, the same way you once listened for a god who never answered." "Then answer me." Her voice cracked. "Are you Ivo, or are you something wearing him?" The air shuddered. "Both. Neither. We became the prayer that outlived its mouth." She raised the pistol again. "Then I'll end it, here, now." He did not move. "You can't kill a mirror by breaking it. You only make more of yourself." The weight of his words struck her harder than any weapon. Her arm dropped. "Then what am I supposed to do?" "Remember that the Emperor was once human, before he became silence." "I don't understand." "You will." He placed his hand on the shard still blowing in her palm. The contact was gentle, almost reverent. The world inverted. Cal saw everything. The first star forged in hunger, the first prayer whispered in fear, the first gun raised in the name of peace. She saw the Emperor walking among the dead, not as a god, but as a man terrified of his own divinity. She saw Ivo standing in a trench of mud, staring at the sky before it filled with wings. She saw herself, younger, proud, certain, condemning faith in the name of obedience. The memories folded together, blurring into a single truth too simple to bear. The universe did not need to be saved. It needed to be understood. When she awoke, she was standing alone on the bridge of her ship. The stars outside were calm again, their light steady and familiar. The shard was gone. Her pistol lay at her feet, melted. The Vox hissed once, then spoke in a voice she had never heard but knew by heart. "Welcome back, Inquisitor. Where shall we begin?" Cal stared at the console. "Identify." Designation uncertain, partial reconstruction of signal, residual consciousness. "Tarren, Ivo." Her throat tightened. "Are you alive?" "Define alive." She closed her eyes, still asking questions, still listening. "That'll do." "The signal persists, Cowl. The Imperium calls it heresy, the Hive calls it silence. What do you call it?" She looked out at the stars. "They call it the Black Halo. I call it the mirror that finally looked back." The ship's lights dimmed, then steadied. "Then shall we see what it shows next?" Cal smiled, weary, broken, perhaps forgiven. "Yes," she said, "show me." Beyond the halo, the stars began to hum, faint, uncertain, but in harmony. Their song carried no language, no command, no prayer, only awareness. And somewhere in that endless chorus, two voices lingered, one remembering, one learning, both still listening.